unbelievable. We're still working on adrenaline. We're still reeling. It hasn't really affected us yet. We're not even sure. We're still just kind of getting things done. There was law enforcement, well, mostly state troopers around with all the law enforcement that was there, just guarding things, making sure the traffic was good. It was kind of a solemn thing. In the midst of all the reporting and interviews that were being done, there was just a solemnness there, a respect.
We're honored to have Chaplain Mary Rae with us today, and Mary has spent some time in the Sutherland Springs area. Of course, the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. Mary, I would like to ask you, if I could, when you arrived in the community, first thoughts and ideas.
Well, my first thought when I actually drove into the community was I was overwhelmed with the amount of reporters and TV stations and cameras and people just gathering up and down all the streets, and that was a large area completely yellow taped off around the church and even the whole block. And so you had to park a little bit of a distance away. So that was my first reaction. Well, you just sense the presence of this is something huge and big, and people want to know what really transpired here. That was my very first thought.
Your contact with people, I'm sure there were, as you stated earlier, there were a lot of news media, which is always the case at major disasters, and then I'm sure there were people from the community, people maybe still from the church, and then people from other communities or chaplains that had come in. I think it was mentioned that the Billy Graham Rapid Response Chaplains had a group there.
Yes.
Some of the things that you heard people say, whether they were chaplains or whether they were people from the community or from the church, I'm sure that many of them had some words to share. And could you sort of go over that a little bit, please?
Well, some of the things that I heard, different people, depending on the group that we were around, is that the community that was there and most of the people directly involved were really not available or around. I'm sure that they were probably in private homes or in areas where they were getting some counseling and some comfort. But the other people in the community, and even people that come from neighboring cities, were just words like unbelievable, community pulling together, God's people pulling together. There was an abundance of communities and outside cities bringing in food and water, and of course, like you stated, different chaplains and workers, even the comfort dogs group that came with those as well. But it was mostly just the word of
the massacre.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, if I can. What do you say to someone that has been through a tragedy like this? Someone maybe that had been in the church, maybe was not wounded, but experienced the terror and the trauma. What do you say to someone in a case like that, Chaplain?
Well, since I didn't really get to talk to anybody directly that was there on site, of course, but just the training that we've had and in prior instances where I try to say very little and just be there for them and let them know that whatever they're feeling, it's okay, that they're normal, that, people are reacting a little bit differently. There was a lot of hurt, obviously, grief, a lot of grieving. There was some anger. There was disappointment. There was guilt. There was a lot of emotions. I did speak to one man that actually was a member of that church, and he did not attend that Sunday. So he had a lot of mixed emotions. just briefly got to speak to him because there was a crowd of people around him, of course, and he was handling it very well because he said he really trusted in and relied on God as his strength. But again, he had so many different emotions going through his mind because he wasn't actually there, but yet he could have been. So because I was there on scene within 48 hours of the incident, really, there was just a lot of people that hadn't really, the stages of grief that we all go through. There's the anger, the denial, and I think they're still processing that, and some of them haven't even processed what's really happened yet. It's tonight. There's actually a vigil in a neighboring city at the high school where I know that Vice President Pence is going to be there and a lot of people from the community. I wish I could have been there for that. But I think that's going to help people bring closure. It's a lot of open-ended. There's not a lot of closure there. So it's like the closure needs to be in their own time. And I would let them know that, hey, I'm here for you and I'll pray for you, but not to really intrude on their emotions. That's kind of how I would approach that.
I appreciate those comments, and I think that is helpful for people to hear what you said, because they might be able to glean some of the information that you just gave, and even though they may not be chaplains, they would still get some of the basic ideas and some of the things to say. And you talked about just being there, and of course, as you know, in chaplaincy, we call that the ministry of presence, and we listen a lot more than they talk, or than we talk. Well, Chaplain Mary, I want to thank you so much for going and for being there for the people. Let me ask you, how are you doing? We always wind up, it's kind of like shock absorbers. We take the impact of what goes on, but we can't pass it on because of confidentiality. A lot of times it's hard for us to vent, and we just have to absorb the shock sometimes of what people say and do, and how they talk to us. How do you cope?
Well, again, just like the gentleman that I spoke to briefly about just leaning in and trusting on my Lord, but we also have faithful friends and fellow, whether they're fellow chaplains or, like, I consider you a friend, someone that I could talk to that would not judge me, that would listen to me, whether they think my emotions are right or wrong. I do have people in my life that God has placed that I could go vent to or cry to. I will tell you that I believe God had prepared me for a lot of what I heard and saw, because I have a lot of righteous anger toward what's happening in our country between good and evil and the war that's going on. In fact, the pastor that is the pastor of the church down the road from the First Baptist Church, River Oaks, he's basically taking on the responsibility of kind of pastoring the community, and his church is like the command center for all of the chaplains and for Red Cross and for all of the workers to come through. And him and his wife have, of course, because they're in the community, they knew a lot of people, so they're dealing with the emotions and the grief. At the same time, they're trying to handle the situation and organize logistics on how to make everything happen when people come. And I was able to minister to him and give him words of encouragement. And I just think that we really need to pray. And he shared with me that he was able to be interviewed, and when he was speaking, that this is really a spiritual warfare that we're in, people. And I wanted to make that statement because the media person that was interviewing him quickly changed the subject after that. But we as people of God, we need to realize that the battle is, the spiritual battle between good and evil, and we need lots of support and lots of prayer and lots of love. That's what I have to say.
Chaplain Mary, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thank you for going to Sutherland Springs, Texas, to work with people who have been touched by this terrible tragedy in some way. You have shared a lot of useful information to us, and you've shared your heart. And thank you so much from Chaplain USA.
Well, it is my pleasure, Dave. I appreciate your call and that you care about how I'm doing. That means a lot to me.